So thank you everyone for joining. Welcome to today's education webcast. My name is Austin Lamarche. I'm the marketing specialist for Buffet Crampon Canada with a focus in education outreach. I'm really excited about this first series of education webcasts. I think it's going to be fantastic, and I hope that you guys are going to get a lot out of it. First of all, we know that this year has been unprecedented, it's been unpredictable, and so I just wanted to congratulate anyone who graduated this year, just for getting through the year. Congratulations. You should be really proud of yourselves. It's a big accomplishment. So today we are lucky enough to be joined by two fantastic Buffet Crampon clarinet artists. We have Dr. Cathy Wood from Brandon University in Brandon, Manitoba, and Dr. Jana Starling from Western University in London, Ontario. And they're going to be talking today about all things clarinet, about some summer practice goals, what to be looking ahead for university up in the fall, all kinds of things.
Thank you for joining us. Dr. Wood and I got together and we discussed some topics that we thought might be very valuable for people as they're preparing over the summer to enter, either returning to school or even for the first time going into university. And the first one doesn't need too much discussion. It's just equipment, the clarinetist equipment needs. And there's a PDF that I'd like to pull up right now. And I think if you read over it, it's pretty clear. But there is kind of an order in which we need to purchase things, and a minimum things that we need for the first year that are of priority, which would be something like a professional level clarinet, obviously a supply of reeds, a metronome, a tuner, sheet music and etudes, and piano accompaniment costs. So this is also kind of like equipment need, but also like costs that we incur as clarinetists. Those are kind of minimum things, and then we have like secondary needs, and that only means like once you've got the primary, you know, now start looking into that. Doesn't mean that you have to wait, it's just that you have to have the primary. So of course we want to buy our instrument and then match our mouthpiece, right? And then match a barrel. So there's a certain order. And then we have tertiary needs. I think some of these will change, like for like something like a case, a gig bag or a case bag. You might need that more depending on the humidity and the temperature of your province during especially the winter, of course. I just put a legend there. Just take note, there's different colors for different levels of need, but also the underline means typically done with guidance from instructor and professional. So guidance meaning if you're buying a barrel and you want to buy a barrel over the summer, let's say it's really important to have other people, especially professionals, listen to you, whether it's your instructor or not, because they can vary so much and it really depends on what element you're going for, and we need often somebody to listen to you from afar, not because what we get, the sense that we get when we're playing is not quite the same as from afar. So that's what the underline mean, is getting guidance from somebody. And then the asterisks mean individual instructors may want to share their preferences, so that has to do with like additions for repertoire, the type of reed adjustment equipment that you might want. So if you're kind of an open slate, then your professor might have more familiarity with one and want to kind of guide you. So I think that's self-explanatory, and then we'll let Cathy or Dr. Wood take over.
Hi, so the next topic we wanted to talk about was summer reading. I'm a big reader and there's some really wonderful clarinet books out there. So I'm just going to hold up some books. Later on, we'll put up the PDF and you'll have that, so don't worry about writing down authors or anything like that. But I just wanted to share some of my favorite books. It was a bit tricky picking only a few, although there's maybe about 15. This first book might seem a little odd. It's actually written for tennis players, not musicians, and it's The Inner Game of Tennis. I think this is a book that every musician should read. It's really excellent, and it basically talks about, it's a sports psychology book, and it's mental preparation for optimal performance success and for winning and that kind of thing, combating performance anxiety and fear. So I would highly recommend this book, and I think it's available in multiple languages as well. It was so popular that there were a bunch of spin-off books, and so the next one, you may have heard of this, is The Inner Game of Music. So it's similar to the inner game of tennis, but it gives you some specific musical examples. And it's performance psychology. There's also a video series of this as well. Both great books. I personally love the inner game of tennis because I like to draw my own conclusions, but both fantastic. Another really good one is The Art of Practicing. It's a great guide on how to approach practicing and also to prepare your mind and your body for productive and enjoyable practice. I'll talk a bit more about this one later. One of my new favorites, I'm reading this for the second time already, is Atomic Habits. This is not geared at musicians, but it really applies to what we do. It's basically how small changes to your everyday habits can have just amazing results. So it's a self-improvement and it's also geared towards career success, but it applies to many areas of your life. So highly recommend this one. It's available in a lot of different languages and ebook and all that kind of thing. The next two, so the first one is Beyond Talent, and these are books that are dealing more with entrepreneurship and music business, promotion, making websites, kind of the outside of the practice room activities. So this is Beyond Talent, Creating a Successful Career in Music. Very great book. Similarly, The Savvy Musician, building a career, earning a living, and making a difference. So another entrepreneurship and music business book. Great advice about marketing and creating a niche. I love this next one, and any book that is about staying healthy, preventing injury. So this is The Athletic Musician, A Guide to Playing Without Pain. And it's really important, I'll talk about this later too, that we are athletes. They might be smaller muscles, but we're athletes. And this book has specific clarinet stretches, and we'll get to that later too. The next one's by a clarinet player, and this is Clarinet Secrets. There's 52 secrets, maybe one a week if you want to read it over the year. And it just has a whole variety of things from learning to flutter tongue, playing klezmer, and there's a couple sequels, I think. Dr. Starling, you said there were two? Yeah, so 2 sequels to this as well. This next one is great. It's a really complete, thorough, yet succinct book about clarinet pedagogy. It is a little, I say old school in the format. Just if you look at it, it might not look so interesting, but it's really well written. And this is The Art of Clarinet Playing by Keith Stein. This next one has a great format and is really entertaining. It's Clarinet for Dummies, written by a former teacher of mine, David Etheridge. And it's a fun, easy read. There's cartoons, little tips, but it's really excellent information for players of all levels. The Clarinet and Clarinet Playing by David Pino. Great book, bit of everything in here, pedagogy, history, repertoire, equipment, really great book. Another one that has a bit of everything is Colin Lawson's The Cambridge Companion to the Clarinet. A lot of historical chapters in here, different members of the clarinet family, historical clarinets, a little bit about jazz and composers. Very good book. The next one I forgot to bring home, and I'm trying to stay away from the office, but it is an excellent book called The Educator's Guide to the Clarinet, a complete guide to teaching and learning the clarinet. It is excellent for teaching and for learning. It's the table of contents is so impressive. It's super long, but it's very detailed, and you can find exactly the specific thing you're trying to teach very quickly. So I highly recommend that. That's by Ridenour. And then almost at the end here, this is Talent is Overrated, and what really separates world-class performers from everyone else. It talks about the importance of deliberate practice in all performance-based careers. This next one's a new one that came out. It is Yoga in the Music Studio, very thorough. Of course, it's talking about yoga, but it's also, it has some great examples for people who teach young children, all the way through those of us professionals, just different yoga examples and how to improve your playing through relaxation, strength, and mobility. And then maybe we can pop the PDF up just while I do these last two. These two are very easy reads, kind of fun summer reads. They're Steal Like an Artist and there's Show Your Work. They've got lots of wonderful quotes, really quick just to pick up, read a few things, put it back down. Excellent books. Now, up on the PDF there's a couple of blogs and articles that I've included. Some of you may be familiar already with Jenny Clarinet. She's got a really popular blog about all things clarinet. And then the Bulletproof Musician is a really great one too. And then finally, under articles, the Clarinet Journal, which is the International Clarinet Association, their journal. It has articles really on everything about the clarinet. And right now they have a special $10 for student memberships. I'd highly, highly recommend joining the ICA.
Great. Now we're going to move to summer preparation and perhaps with repertoire. So perhaps you've talked to your instructor and you've chosen your repertoire for the first year or your next year. Here are some ideas on how the summer can be best spent in preparation for the year. And so, of course, as musicians, we're always thinking what we have to practice, but there's also a lot of other kind of administrative and a lot of preliminary steps that can be done to kind of aid your practice before you start. So I have about 8 suggestions. One of them the first one is locating a recording for each one of your pieces, or a variety of recordings, and then so storing or referencing your favorite ones or an industry standard on your device for passive listening later on. So you just always can be listening to your repertoire on the way to school or on the way to work, etc. And then also you'll use those same recordings for active listening, which would be when you're looking actually at your clarinet part, or more specifically the piano part. So just gather your recordings. Second one is photocopying and scanning the piano part, because eventually you're going to give the original to your piano accompanist. So having a copy. These are just little administrative things you can do. You could write in some piano cues that you think you might need in your part. After listening and playing through a piece, can you then break it up into sections? So just with a pencil, kind of tentatively put in larger sections. This might help you with your practice journals that Dr. Wood will talk about later, and just practice goals and pacing, so that you're kind of getting to the harder sections first. You've labeled them, which one is more challenging, which one needs maybe more attention. You could also label them as, what kind of focus should I have on this one? This is our technical one, but I want to make it technical. It's a technical passage, but I want to make sure it's light. So you might put technical and light, and another one might be, tuning, I'm gonna have to work on this. But you're just starting to organize these large sections. The fourth one is acquire the metronome goal ranges. So that's from your recordings or from a teacher, etc. Fifth one, define all the musical terms and symbols. 6, I love this one, but it's creating your own cheat sheet or quick technical sheet. So you just go locate and copy or scan the hardest parts of a particular piece. Good old scissors and glue, cut and paste a one sheet that you've got, like, these are all the hardest parts of the first movement of my concerto, and I can quickly practice those. Or I access all of those to go through and say, if you only have 30 minutes and you say, I want to hit this movement, I'm going to go straight to the hard parts. It's all right there. And so actually let's show the PDF, and I'll show you what I mean. And there's a little bit of an example of this that I put at the bottom. You could also, beside the actual excerpts, you can put your tempo progress. So you kind of have a sense of which ones, very quickly and in an organized fashion, you know which ones need a little bit more work. Number 7 is from your playing, and particularly from your listening to recordings, tentatively write in breath marks. Don't wait. You don't have to wait till the end. You don't have to wait till your teacher instructs you, but where are you going to breathe, so that you're instantly practicing with that in mind. And then again, number 8 is just start to put things together. Start to put sections together. You may want to start with your more difficult sections, but just kind of being very organized with your repertoire, because I do think that it's a matter of trying to free up your time later in the fall. Like, that's what the summer should be, is about absorbing, as absorbing and reading, but also kind of getting really organized and starting very focused, because we're generally a little more mentally relaxed in the summer, right? And so if the more organized you're getting, then when you start really hitting it hard in September or whenever you do, you're just more prepared.
Great. The next topic is practice goals, but just goals in general. I'm a really strong believer in writing down your goals. Every year I have my students do this, and I do this myself. I will write down my short-term goals, what I want to accomplish in that year, mid-range goals, what I want to do in the next 5 years, and then long-term goals around 10 years. I really believe that you need a plan, and if you write it down, you're more likely to achieve it if you commit to it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about practice goals. I just want to start with a quote because I love quotes, and this is Aristotle, and he said, "We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, therefore, is not an act, but a habit." And so it kind of brings us back to this Atomic Habits book that I love, and just talking about the little things that you do every day, how that really has a huge effect on your life. And this definitely includes practicing. Just to really think about your intention when you're practicing and to be deliberate about it. Don't just put in the time, but have a really specific plan. So that brings me to SMART goals, S-M-A-R-T. Each of these letters stands for something. This is a sort of a business acronym they use. The S of SMART is specific. So be really specific about your goals. If you're writing down your practice goals, don't just say, I want to practice the Mozart concerto and F sharp major scale. You know, be specific about which passages, what do you want to accomplish? Are you working on the ornamentation in your Rose Etude? Do you want the speed of your F sharp major scale to go from 116 to 120 that day? Or, you know, be really specific. The M is measured. So this relates to specific. You can think about measuring it with metronome markings. I have some students use a decibel meter as we're working on some dynamics. Definitely tuner is useful for this too. The A is achievable or attainable. You know, it has to be a possible goal. I'm not gonna, you know, make a goal that I can learn the Nielsen concerto in one day or something like that. You know, you need to be realistic, which is the R, so they're kind of similar. So realistic, note that, you know, you might have 3 steps forward one day and then 1 step back when you start the next day. You don't necessarily go from 116 to 126 one day and the next day you start at 126. No, you might start back a little bit. So just be realistic. And then finally, the T of SMART is time bound. Give yourself deadlines. Deadlines are really important because then you can keep track of everything, and you also learn what is possible in certain amounts of time. So you may be a little ambitious about it, or you may be able to do more than you think. There's a quote that I didn't realize I said. A student was just talking about this the other day on a video. Goals without deadlines are just dreams. So just to think about that. So I highly suggest this summer experimenting with a practice journal. Write down your goals each day, reflect on them at the end of your practice session. Don't spend a huge amount of time doing this. I mean, you want to spend some time actually practicing, but thinking about it, you'll get much more out of it. It's really worth taking a bit of time, writing it down, tracking your progress, your mood, how you're going to divide up your practice. You know, there's a lot of things we need to work on. So it's good to kind of have a plan. I'm going to spend 10 minutes on my drones. I'm going to do long tones for X amount of time, finger warm-ups for 20 minutes, that kind of thing. So that way you can hit all the areas, which Dr. Starling is going to talk about in a bit. And also with practice, think about your environment. So you want to be prepared and have all the tools you need at hand. This is especially important for your lessons in the fall. Your teacher will appreciate it if you're not rummaging around trying to find your piece and then you can't find your pencil, etc. So be organized, have all your tools, try to create a welcoming, distraction-free environment. And so along with that, turn your cell phone off, or at least turn the notifications off if you're using the phone to record or as your metronome or tuner. But the distractions will really set you back and really use up your time. So try to eliminate that. I'm going to talk about health in a bit. And then finally, just going back to this art of practice. I'll just highlight a couple of things. There's 10 different steps they list in this. I'm just going to highlight a couple of them. Number one, they talk about stretching, which we'll get to. They talk about settling into your environment, being present, being mentally prepared so that you get the most out of your practice. They talk about the use of body mechanics, which we'll get to at the end of this presentation, and organizing notes into groups, which Dr. Starling's going to talk about, across the beat and that kind of thing. And then finally, follow your curiosity. Be flexible about your practice. You have a plan, but it's okay to deviate from that plan. You might be having a day where you're just really loving your crêpe etudes. Well, stick with it for a bit. Or you might have a day that you really can't do a certain thing. Save it for another practice session. Be flexible and follow your curiosity.
Great, so now we're going to talk about practicing and mastering technical passages, of which, of course, we have many as clarinetists. And I like to think of it as that a technical passage has three phases, like three life stages. The first one being kind of like the baby. It's the time where we're muscularly learning the lick, we're exploring it, and we're actually creating myelin. The second one would be reviewing the myelin creation and building on that. And then the third one is kind of integrating and being performance ready. And so let's go back to the first one. There's a great book called The Talent Code by Daniel Coyle. And I've taken some, just really, really briefly paraphrase some of his basic information. And basically he's kind of unmystifying what happens when we practice. And it's really not just about this innate talent, but it's about biologically what is happening. And so he discusses every movement, human movement, is a precisely timed electronic or electric signal traveling through a chain of neurons. And there's this soft fatty material called myelin that forms a thick layer around the nerve fiber of the neuron. So the more we fire a particular circuit, the more myelin is built up, making this chain of neurons stronger, faster, and more fluent. And this increases the signal strength of this pathway. So that's exactly what we want. We want something that becomes so automatic, like say a certain pattern, to become so automatic, it's strong, it's familiar, it's fluent, right? And that comes with you biologically being really, really fluent and familiar with that passage, that you don't even have to think about individual notes. It is a group that you've grouped together so often that your brain has grabbed on and said yes. And that's what that, and what he says is that that's really because the myelin is really, really strengthened for that pathway, for that set of motions. So this is when your practicing is going to be at the slower tempi and more exploratory and out of musical context. Because what you're doing is you're actually not learning like the notes, you're learning the individual choreography between the notes. Right? And it's kind of arbitrary what you're reading, it's arbitrary what note it is. It's whether or not you've got really well timed, choreography of your fingers. The second one is developing your myelin. So you've kind of established it, you've created some, but now you want to start testing it a little bit and getting stronger. So you're going to maybe increase the tempo for some of your myelin exercises. I'll show those in a bit. But there's also things called looping, which is where you have a nucleus, a note grouping, and you practice that first, and then you go backwards a bit, and then through that nucleus, and then back even further. And so you're kind of making a loop. You're starting to put it into context. Right? Metronome games where you kind of jump, you play something really slowly 5 times at a certain slow tempo, and you play it 5 times, then you jump ahead 3 metronome increments. That might be 10 is per increment, so maybe 30 clicks, you play it once. Then you go back 2 clicks, which is, 2 steps, which might be back 20 clicks, play it 5 times again, and then go 3. So you're kind of playing a leapfrog with yourself between slow and fast, etc. And then, of course, the third one is when, you're right into musical context, right? And you're playing things at and under and over tempo. And you're always, in stages 2 and 3, you're always assessing whether or not a passage is really there, or whether it needs to go back to and have some more myelin creation. It needs to be more in 1 and 2. And you're going to find that you can't be judgmental, like something that looks really hard might fit under the fingers, and like, I don't know, for some reason it's in number 3, whereas I've been in situations where I still got to work on like a certain spot that might be based on F major, but for some reason my fingers don't want to do it, and I don't judge it. I just go, for some reason this one is not coming into musical context, so I take it back into phase 1. So it's really not what it looks like, you know, it's just where it is, and just try to be non-judgmental with that. So if we can take a look at the life phases PDF, and I don't need to go over it because I just discussed it, but you could at least see it right there. And then let's go to the next one. I've given some myelin creation exercises. And so the first one, under number 1, this is like in the first stage, is I'd be anchoring significant or starting pitches. And you can change it up. But say my lick is, that I have the original lick right there. It's about 3 beats. It's right at the beginning. Let me just see my reed works. So I might provide some anchors, and I would do this without metronome. Right, and then I can change those anchors. I tend to like the anchors that start a scale or are on the beat. Okay, so I'm doing this out of context. You can, and without a metronome, but you can also do it with a metronome. Then when you feel more ready, use different rhythms. And that's the second one. And I would still do this without a metronome, because I think right now we're trying to go as slow. You can move whenever you're ready, but keep things very, very slow so that you're being more mindful. Sometimes when we put a metronome on, we push to go with the metronome. And I think in the exploration stage, you're just kind of truly exploring. Right? I'm just kind of playing with it a bit. And I might do each one of those rhythms about 3 times each, 4 times each. Then I go to, the third one is shifting the rhythmic groupings with a metronome. So you put the downbeat on different notes. So one way to do that is take something that's in 4 and change it to triplets. So the first one. Right? And then I'm going to shift it so that the second note is actually on the beat. And then, of course, now we're going to, we can keep going with that to the third note, but now we're going to go to an example of keeping it in 4s, but putting the second note on the beat. So now I have a pickup. No, sorry. And then the third note on the downbeat. And so if I was playing this with the metronome, where did my trusty metronome go? I had it set up here. Can you hear it? Probably. Right, you get the idea there? And so what you're doing is we're repeating, but we're making it slightly more challenging because it's a little bit different each time. And also I think as a player, we don't get bored, but more so our brain doesn't get bored, because because if we repeat something too many times the same way, then our brain can get very, very passive. Now, so those are myelin creation exercises. When you feel, and of course memorizing does this as well. If you're memorizing in all of these patterns, you're creating even more myelin. You can increase all of these myelin exercises with the metronome. Okay, like use the metronome once you've done it without a metronome. Now, number 2 is what I mean. I just want to give some examples of the looping exercise. You can, so what you do is the nucleus is number 1. You can maybe see it. It might be a little bit small on your computer, but you take a nucleus and then move back. So that's my nucleus. Now I'm going to do number 2. Now with the looping exercise, I may actually also use the rhythm exercise and put it all together. So you can get that right up to tempo. So there's many, many ways to be creating myelin and developing myelin. So I think this kind of corresponds with your preparation, your summer preparations. This is what I'd be working on more so, is just building up as much familiarity with all of these passages, so so that you're really ready to go when you get to a more consistent instruction, versus kind of, okay, I've Dr. Starling, I've learned all my pieces and I can really play, and then they just kind of go through it in September, and then we have to backtrack. So just try to keep in mind that, what stage are you in? Should you be in 3 right now, or should you be more in 2 and 1? And some of you may be in 3, but just know where each of your pieces and each of these licks kind of sit. That would be my advice for practicing. Thank you.
Great. The next topic I wanted to talk about is musician health, both hygiene and injury prevention. I think this is a really important topic that is often overlooked or underestimated by younger players. And it's actually one of the good things that's come out of this pandemic is we're all a lot more aware of hygiene and health. And so I just want to talk a little bit about it. It's really, really important for teachers and also as playing musicians to be in good health. I mean, you need to be able to play. You can't cancel gigs if you're sick, and you don't want to be injured. You want a long, healthy career, and you want to play at your best. So this is very, very important. Your overall health is important, and going into university, first few years of your career, it's often we overlook things like sleep and good food, vitamins, lots of water. So these are things to think about. They really do make a difference. Your mental health is very important. Hygiene, which is all over the news right now anyways, so I'm sure you're hearing a lot about that. But then also your strength and your flexibility and your cardio as wind players is very important. Music buildings can be dangerous places. There's a lot of saliva. Illnesses spread pretty quickly. So it's something to think about as you're going back to university. And, wash your hands, avoid touching your face. All that is excellent advice. I'm a little bit of a germaphobe, so I don't touch doorknobs with my hands, or if I do, I wash them right away after. And just try to think about what things are being touched frequently by other people, and wash your hands. It seems really simple, but very important. Clean your equipment. So we often hear about cleaning your mouthpiece, and you might have something like Sтерosol, especially if you're sharing bass clarinet mouthpieces or something like that. But sometimes people forget about cleaning your reed cases or cleaning your phone. Phones can be disgusting. Clean your tuner, your swab, maybe even the handles and zippers of your case. Just anything you're touching, free pencils. Think about cleaning it, especially going back this fall. And then be aware of shared equipment, just like I mentioned about the bass clarinet mouthpieces. So if you can avoid it, great. If you can't, just be really thorough. Next, I want to talk about injury prevention, because most professionals at some point in their career have had some kind of injury. Hopefully not an injury that affects their career in the long term, but most of us have had one at some point. When I was in undergrad, I sprained my soft palate, which is actually a really common injury for clarinet players. And the good thing that came out of it is I learned about good practice techniques, and I did recover, and now I'm able to help other students who go through this. To injury prevention, you want to have a long career, and it's something to think about. We are athletes, they're smaller muscles, and we do need to care for our bodies. So again, coming back to this book, The Athletic Musician, it has some great stretches that are really important. I'm just going to quickly go through a few. Now, when you do a stretch, you really should hold it for about 30 seconds. I'm not going to do that because we don't have the time. But first of all, you should warm up overall. Before you practice, run up and down the stairs, take a walk around the building, just get your heart rate up and get warm so that you're not playing with cold fingers, cold hands, etc. So just a couple quick stretches. If you put your arm out straight and then gently pull back your hand. Now you always want to do, so I would hold that for 30 seconds. I would do the other side. And then you always want to stretch opposing muscles too. So then I would do downwards like this, or even a better variation is you bring your fingers together and then also do that. And you'll feel that stretching in different places. Those are really great because we get a lot of, I know I get a lot of tension in my forearms. Then another one for your neck and back. We're sitting a lot as musicians. That tends to be the place where we hold our tension. Is if you pretend you're putting your ear to your shoulder and then take that arm on that side and just add a bit of weight. Don't pull your head down, but just add a bit of weight. And if you want to increase it even more, then with the other arm, you can put it out straight and flex the hand. It's a really great stretch. And I would, of course, do the same thing on the other side. A variation of that, instead of ear to shoulder, is nose to armpit. So it's a different stretch, different part of the neck. So I would do that. I would add the weight of the hand, and then I would also do this. Looks a little funny, but it works. Then a really good upper back stretch, I'll just do one more, this is a little complicated. So your arms are out straight. Here's the hard part. So look how my thumbs are up. I cross them over, and now my thumbs are down. Okay? So my hands are together like this, and then I'm just in a neutral position. I'm gonna pull my arms forward, and it's a really good upper back stretch, and I would hold that for 30 seconds. Tons of other stretches. I definitely would stretch when I'm in faculty meetings. I'm stretching my fingers. I'm stretching my thumbs very often because we have a lot of thumb issues holding that heavy clarinet. But there's lots of great resources like that book and videos online that you can check out. Take regular breaks. Keep your practice regular. Don't cram it all into a few days before your lesson. That's going to help too. Be aware that you're sitting a lot. So sitting properly, you want to try to have your knees below your hips, which usually means sitting on the edge of your chair. Consider looking into Alexander technique, doing some yoga. Just any body awareness is very helpful. I would also consider working on your strength, your core, your flexibility. If your body functions optimally, you're going to play better and you're not going to get sick as much. So that's really important. And then finally, think about the quality of your practice, not the quantity. I've got a couple, there's a handout that you'll see later, and there's a couple links for some COVID-19 cleaning and hygiene specifically for clarinet and wind instruments.
Great. So now we're going to cover a little bit of fundamentals and just talking about warming up. And warming up for me is and for many of us, it's about developing really strong habits in our fundamentals, but it's also about retaining them, right, and reviewing them. And so it's very important to make these exercises part of your regular practice, because we're not going to retain maybe amazing progress that we have made if we don't do it continually. So we're not going to talk about all of them, but ones that we've kind of outlined were mind and body, which is what Dr. Wood was kind of talking about, is doing some preliminary warming up and stretching, posture, of course, and then moving on to air, long tones, intonation, voicing or harmonic exercises, fingers, and then articulation. And if you notice, that kind of progress starts from like large muscles to smallest muscles and slowest to fastest. And that's a very common kind of structure that many professionals use, so that they are truly warmed up once they start stressing the smaller muscles. So if we can look at that warming up PDF. If I'm feeling tight in the, with my air, air is almost with my mind and body, because you can feel if your mind and body is very tight or very distracted, you're probably not taking a very relaxed, deep, thorough breath. So just kind of keep an eye on that. But when I do feel like I need a little extra focus on that, I gravitate to this one exercise that's with a barrel. And you completely exaggerate and exhale everything, all of your air out, until you can't do anymore and everything is squeezing and it's like really, really uncomfortable. And I'm actually shaking, like you have to get to that really, really uncomfortable, really, really squeezed out feeling. It's always longer, you can always do a few more seconds, and then wrap your lips around the barrel and it just kind of rushes in because it's just so contracted, and it's so constricted, and there's a vacuum of pressure there that wants the air to, and it helps you take a much larger breath. Then I would move to long tones, and long tones are only really about focusing on creating your best sound and sustaining a stable tone. And so this is often the time where we're listening very carefully to our sound, but we're focusing on correct embouchure and good breath management. There's many types of long tones. What I tend to do is start with the more simple and more adjacent type long tones, like either single note fermatas, maybe with some dynamics, or chromatic whole notes. What I'm really just trying to do is sustain my sound and really connect between the notes. Other types of long tones are great, register changes and interval practicing, maybe octaves or fifths, which is great, but it's also a little bit more taxing, right? We're adding a few more elements on. So I generally start with something more simplistic.
Great. The next topic we wanted to explore is intonation, ear training, and clarinet tendencies. Now, I think this is an area that's often maybe not overlooked, but underestimated, especially by a lot of younger players. We want to get to the technique and we want to be playing our pieces, but it's a really, really important part of our playing. You can be playing Flight of the Bumblebee, you can play all this fast, flashy technique, but if it's out of tune, honestly, nobody really wants to hear it. It's going to sound bad, right? So tuning is really important. And it also helps you, when you're thinking about your tuning, develop good fundamentals, good tongue position and voicing and all that stuff, and making sure that you have good equipment. So you always want to play in tune, not just when you're playing with others, but when you're playing by yourself, you want to be in tune with yourself. You're training your ears. So equipment-wise, Dr. Starling had that great handout at the beginning, but just to emphasize, get a good quality tuner, one that's fairly sensitive. I know there's some out there that will tell you you're in tune, but really you're 5 cents sharp or flat. Sometimes they have adjustable sensitivity, so consider that. And then I would strongly recommend a tuner or a metronome that has a drone function. So I've got this beast of a metronome, and it has a drone. And that's what I'm going to be talking about right now, is the drone. There's also apps, so you can get a physical tuner, but there's lots of great apps. I've got them on the handout. You can see that later. And then a recording device, whether it's your phone or some other kind of device. Lots of things affect our tuning, and your mouthpiece, your barrel, definitely your ears, your ear training. If I'm traveling to Europe to play, I will start training my ears for, if I'm going somewhere where it's 442 or 444, 8444. I will start training my ears in advance. But then also, you know, the tone holes on your clarinet, the temperature of the room, the height of your keys. Ask your teacher about equipment though before you run out and buy some new things. And then just be aware there's also tuning rings. So if you need a longer barrel, but you're not quite ready to invest in one, tuning rings can be very helpful. So drones, I think this is a really important thing to work on. It's a great way to train your ears. It works pretty quickly too. And it teaches you not to be dependent on the tuner and to just use your ears. So it's tuning in context. You know, when you're playing in an orchestra or a band, you're not sitting there with your tuner on your stand looking at every note. You're listening to the people around you. You're listening to your intervals and how you fit in chords. So drones will help you with that. And I will just put on a drone, and I'll sometimes do it with my long tones. And I'll just show you a couple of examples in a second, but put on the drone, sing the interval out loud, sing it in your head, pre-hear the note, that helps with that, and then play it and note any adjustments. I like to have a notebook to kind of take note, and you'll begin to learn there's certain tendencies on the clarinet. It's definitely, there's some notes that tend to be a little sharp or a little flat, and it's just good to know that. So yeah, you can use drones with scales, long tones, intervals, register slurs, harmonics, and I'll just use B flat concert here. So and make sure you're on 440, make sure you've got it calibrated right. You don't want to train your ears to a different pitch. And first of all, I will just match it, or if I'm feeling like I'm maybe not warmed up yet, I might start on the octave because it's a little kinder. And I will play the perfect intervals 1 and 5 and focus on those. And then I might add 4 in. So I'm just gonna quickly, now I have my clarinet's cold. So I tend not to do this as my first exercise. I'll do some other things. And this is usually my second exercise so that I have a better chance at it, but it's good to do it cold sometimes too. So I'm gonna put the drone on, and then I'm just gonna hit 1, 5, and 8, and maybe add some 4 in there. And already I can hear some of the tendencies of the clarinet. So my low C was sharp, it was not in tune, and things a little cold right now too, so there's some things that are I'm adjusting different ways than I'm used to. And then you can add 4 into that. You can put that drone on as your 1 of the chord, and you can play 1, 3, 5 C, E, G against that. You can play 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, just expanding the interval each time. You can play slow scales. But the important thing about this, and if we can pop up the PDF, the second page of the intonation PDF, is it teaches you about what we call pure or just intonation, a sort of real tuning. So pianos, they've had to, I'm not going to get into a big physics discussion, but pianos, you know, if you're singing in a choir or you're playing in an orchestra, playing in a band, you tune a little differently than if you're playing with a piano, because a piano can't move in its pitch, whereas we can. And so, for instance, if you look at this page I have up here, it looks really complicated. Don't worry if it doesn't make sense right now. Use your ears, and that's the best thing. The 2 yellow arrows, just the first one shows you the interval. For instance, if we look at perfect fifth, then if you go to the second yellow arrow at the difference, you'll see that the perfect fifth is 1.96 different. So basically 2 cents. You want this note to be 2 cents sharp. So your fifth, if I'm playing a C and then a G, I want the G to be a little high. Whereas the major third, I want to be about 14 cents low. And you can see this easier in the second chart if you just look at that major chord. And just using your ears, you'll hear when you play the E perfectly in tune with the tuner, it's okay, but it doesn't ring. It doesn't, you're not getting the sympathetic vibrations of the harmonics. If you make that E a little on the flat side, 14 cents flat, it'll settle right in and you'll hear it. So it sounds complicated. Definitely feel free to read some articles about this. You can just look at Wikipedia even. And I just don't want to get into a big explanation, but you'll hear this. Just trust your ears. So the drone exercise is nice for this because you're using your ears and you're getting sort of real tuning, pure tuning. So yeah, intonation, make sure you're spending a chunk of your practice time and always thinking about this in everything that you do.
Great, the next one is fingers. And of course, this is a big one for us, as well as tone. And there's 2 areas in fingers that we want to be thinking about as we're developing. One is like just our actual finger motion, right? Our hand position, but how our fingers move. And of course, we have particular movements that need to be worked on more so than others. Like, you know, like our ring fingers often might be fine, but what's trickier is that left hand index rock, or the right hand rock to get the E flat, or our thumb position or our thumb motion. So those are there's that area of specific finger motion that we need to address. And then the second one is the overall familiarity with patterns. And patterns, because they make up most of our music. Especially earlier music, but in general, if you can visualize and see a pattern and your fingers go to it automatically, you're going to learn your repertoire faster and you're going to be a better sight reader. And that means better gigs, etc. Right? So having that familiarity with patterns. And so with scales, what I tend to do is I start with my least stressful, when it comes to patterns, I start with my least stressful patterns at my slowest tempos, and then I increase to medium and then fast. And then I move to slightly more strenuous pattern, same thing, slow, medium, fast, and then my hardest patterns. So what I mean by that is adjacent patterns are simple scales. That is our simplest motion. that's what I'd start with. Then next strenuous would be arpeggios. These are a little bit more strenuous because now we're leaping, right? We're moving more than one finger. And then probably the most strenuous movement is the opposing directions, which is things like major thirds and minor thirds, where your fingers are going up, down, up, down, up, down, right? So they're moving in different directions. So think about that when you're starting to work on your fingers. Have you warming up with adjacent, or and have you warmed up enough then to go to the more strenuous patterns?
As we move into our last topic now, if you have any questions, please type them into the chat and then Austin can bring them up. So continuing on with what Dr. Starling was talking about is clarinet hand position and finger motion. I really believe that if you're in the ideal place and moving your fingers correctly, you can really play anything. I mean, of course, you need to practice, and if you're a beginner, you're not going to be maybe jumping into a Weber concerto or something like that. But if you're in the correct place and moving correctly, you can play anything, and you can avoid injury as well. So it's a really important idea. And then also most technical issues can be broken down into the movement of individual fingers. So you want to practice with awareness, maybe use a video camera or a mirror, and always try to keep your body motions relaxed and natural. You'll get a handout that has a lot of this in here. Maybe we can pop it up. Posture, I'm not going to get into that too much right now because I just want to get to some of the ones on this sheet that might look a little confusing. So I want to make sure after today that you understand what I was talking about. So posture is pretty straightforward. You can read that. Arms, wrists, I want to show you this one because down and in, it doesn't really make sense unless I've necessarily talked to my students about this or talked to you about it. So you don't necessarily want your wrists just to be straight. You want to have them in, like I'm exaggerating, there shouldn't be any pain, but a little bit in towards the clarinet and a little bit down helps you get that nice angle of the fingers. So when I'm holding my clarinet, my wrists are a little bit down and in. And a good example is you take a glass of water and just take a little sip. And I've moved my wrist down and in. So don't go to an extreme. You'll feel right away if there's any tension. Talk to your teacher about it, but just to think about that. Your hands should be in a natural curve. When they're hanging down at your sides and you're forgetting about them, that's the perfect clarinet curve. We're lucky. We have a pretty natural instrument. Then I want to skip to the base knuckles, the back knuckles. That's referring to these ones at the bottom of your fingers. They are the hinge, and that's where all the motion happens. My fingers don't actually move for the most part. It's all moving here. I'm just keeping that natural curve and using the hinge of my back knuckles. You're always going to listen for tension and check for evenness and ease of playing. The right hand thumb under the thumb rest, you don't want it to be on the knuckle. The knuckle's a joint and you don't want weight or pressure on a joint. So between your knuckle and your fingernail is where the clarinet should rest. There's lots of great little, this is just medical tubing, lots of great little thumb savers and thumb rests that can help you out to make it a little more comfortable. And I should also note that often especially when it's not adjustable, often the thumb rest is a little bit low for most people, and most people have to have it moved. But of course it depends. You talk to your teacher and it depends on your body. We all have different hands. So, my fingernail, okay, so double grip, that refers to the clarinet is gripped by sitting down on my hand, but I have my thumbnail, instead of pointing straight out to, if straight forward is 12 o'clock and this is 9 o'clock, I actually have it pointed at 10 o'clock. I don't know, it's kind of hard to tell on Zoom. So my thumb is also kind of pushing into the clarinet here. So it's really stable. I can move it around and I don't feel like the clarinet's gonna fall off my hands. Thumbnail, I won't get into that right now. Right hand index, so for your side B flat, D flat key, you don't have to use the whole key. You don't want the flat part of your finger against the flat part of the key. You just need the bottom corner of the key and just touch it with the crook of your finger. Left hand thumb. So the left-hand thumb, you want to be in a place where you can press the register key or not press the register key. I know this is very basic, but a lot of times when you're teaching, you'll see this too, is people tend to have it too, it's not angled at all, so they're having to shift up and down or pivot to get the key. So you want to be in a place where you can just bend your knuckle and you push the key, and then not bend it and you release the key. So I have the 1:30, and that's referring to if straight up is 12 o'clock, then my finger is pointing to kind of 1:30-ish. This may vary a little bit, of course, with different thumbs. Left-hand index, I'm going to talk about that in a second. And then finally, pinkies, keep them curved, keep them relaxed. They're our weakest finger very often. And there's a great video on Red Desert Violin that talks about using a clothespin to strengthen the pinky, or I like to use a stress ball very gently. They're tiny muscles, you can overwork them, so just be really cautious with working on pinkies. But you want to, with pinkies, that's where you do bend and have you're bending from other knuckles, not just the base knuckle, because you don't want to shift your hand to get a different pinky key that cause squeaks and leaks. You want to actually to move the finger. So the last handout, if we could go to that. This is the left-hand index finger, and I just wanted to just focus in on this one because this tends to be the finger that causes a lot of the problems for players of all ages. From beginners, it's a lot of the problems with crossing the break relate to this. And even when I was a doctoral student, I was playing this difficult piece by Joan Tower called Wings, and there was this section that had a lot of intense left-hand index finger work. And I did all the right practice things, but I could only get it to a certain tempo and I wanted it faster, and you seem to be stuck there. And then when I found a new position, I mean, we're talking a millimeter or half a millimeter difference, suddenly I could play it. So it's really important. So I'm just going to talk you quickly through this. Left-hand index finger has a few jobs. Of course, the finger goes on the F sharp key, the finger pad, and then the first knuckle on the A key, and then the second knuckle on the G sharp key. Very often, most people's hand shapes, you'll end up being pretty high on the G sharp key. So just to keep that in mind. And basically, and so it's kind of like having a hook, like a hook with your finger, it wraps around, or you can think about, if you were a flute player, how that works. And you just don't want to be traveling to get to that A key. You want to be using the knuckle. So a good way of figuring that out is to finger a low C, add the A key. You're going to get a multiphonic or a squeak probably, because it's not a real note. So I was just adding this, and it basically shows you where on your finger and how your finger should move. The other thing you can do is just take your finger, wag it like you're scolding someone, and then curve it. And that's the motion for clarinet for this key. So it's a tricky one. I've got some examples at the bottom of this page. The first one, knuckle note waltz, slur it all. You can hear your fingers better when you're slurring, the coordination. That's by David Etheridge, who has that Clarinet for Dummies book. The next two, Eric Mandat has a book called Finger Food, which is excellent. And these are all dealing with the left hand. So use the left hand for the D sharp at the beginning of Charmed instead of the right side key. And then finally, Modern Daily Studies by Kalman Opperman. This etude is entitled Left Hand, very imaginative titles, and is a really great book. There's so many great exercise books out there for this, but I would strongly recommend some attention to this finger. And I think actually that might be the end of what we had prepared. And if there's any questions, this would be a good time.
Yeah, so we have a couple, and in the meantime, feel free to type some more if any more come to you. But in the meantime, how would you say is a good way to break up your practice day?
Oh, I always start with a warm up, of course, but usually after I do my warm up, I'm kind of done. Like my warm up is about 45 to an hour, right? So then I stop then, and I usually do it in the morning. First thing I do, or at least a little bit more, a few hours away from my second or third practice session. So if I know I have an ensemble later on, I'm going to do that warm up well enough away from that. Then perhaps I'll have an ensemble rehearsal, and then I can leave an hour or so after that, and then start the bulk of my practice. And so if I'm trying to aim for 2 or 3 hours a day, just on my own individual material, I would do that at 1 hour, and then later on, perhaps not around other rehearsals, my second batch. And when I go to my second session or my second session batch of practicing, I will do a little bit of a warm up, like a miniature, like a 5 minute, just to kind of reconnect and make sure there isn't any tension. But for me, the more I keep playing in the day and the later the day gets, I'm a little more relaxed. So I don't need to do a full warm up.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I think in my first session, it may be all warm up, or sometimes it might be 3/4 warm up, and then maybe a little bit getting into some of the issues I want to deal with later in the day. And then the other practice sessions, I think it is good to include a mini warm up or address issues that you noticed in your big warm up that you might want to explore a little further. I think developing a short warm up too for those later sessions is important, because sometimes you may have to play, you may have a clinic at a school at 7 a.m. and you're staying in a hotel and you can't warm up. So it is good to also have, to be able to play with a mini warm up. Ideally, of course, every day you want to have the big warm up, because you're just going to play at your best and everything's going to be functioning properly. Yeah, so I think as much time as you can spend on the fundamentals, the better. So long tones, finger exercises, if you're just working on how you're moving the individual fingers, you're going to be able to play anything. So if you can spend, an hour doing that, fantastic. And then getting into scales and that kind of thing. But yeah, I think a really good warm up to start out with, and then maybe some mini warm ups in the other sessions.
Awesome. And then one last one was an equipment-based question. When would you recommend being a good time to upgrade to a better mouthpiece?
Yeah, I think it's important, I think it's important obviously first to get the instrument. And then sometimes if I notice that a student may have some changes to make fundamentally, maybe with embouchure, I might not run right away and upgrade to a more professional mouthpiece. As long as they have a mouthpiece that I think functions well with the instrument, and for what we're wanting to do, I want to develop the person's playing enough and also their own ear and really see what they can get out. And then once we really know what we're looking for in a mouthpiece, then I would go then upgrade. So, and look for another one. I think sometimes when people start fishing for things maybe a bit too early, and really they need to figure out what's going on and how to play the instrument, and then what exactly do you want? Not just better. I just want to sound amazing. Well, don't we all? But what do you want darker? What do you need? What do you need clearer? What do you need more in tune? You really have to get to know your instrument. So I think it comes a little bit of maturity there before you you purchase mouthpieces, or better and better mouthpieces. I think we all, as clarinetists, we all know so many people who have a lot of accessories and buy a lot of things, and they may do that early and still not satisfied. And I think then we have to kind of look at the process and go, well, maybe we don't know exactly what you're looking for, and that's why you're buying this stuff and not getting the results you want. So I would say a year or two.
I think to add on to that, it kind of depends what you mean by upgrade. If you're playing on a stock mouthpiece, then I would say you want to do that right away. You actually want to do that before you spend a lot of money on a great instrument. But I think what Dr. Starling was talking about is if you have a decent mouthpiece, but you're looking to upgrade even further. So if you're on a stock mouthpiece, the one that probably came with your clarinet, I would say you'd want to do that right away, but you want a teacher to help you. Don't just run out and buy, even if you know it's a great mouthpiece, don't run out and buy a mouthpiece. You need another set of ears. It's like when you hear yourself in a recording, how it's not really your voice. You're like, that does not sound like me. We hear ourselves differently in our head because of the vibrations than other people hear us. So you really want an experienced pair of ears to help you. And you don't want to, if you're in high school right now, you've just graduated, you don't want to buy a great mouthpiece this summer and then get to university and have your teacher say, oh no, you can't play that. You need to get another one. So try to do it with the teacher's help. And yeah, and then along with what Dr. Starling was saying is if you do have good equipment and you're just looking to upgrade further, yeah, put some thought into that and what is it that you're after? And maybe that can be achieved in the practice room and not just bought sometimes. So talk to your teacher and try out equipment for sure. Oh, it just got really dark in here. Yeah, but if you're on a stock mouthpiece, I would say you want to do that really soon because it's going to get in the way of your tuning. It's going to get in the way of being able to play altissimo and that kind of thing. Something I didn't mention in the practicing session, I just was hurrying through it and got missed a few things, is also, in addition to your fundamentals, try to rotate in some sight reading, some transcription, transposing, extended techniques, those things that may take a while to develop or need to be constantly worked on. Don't forget about that stuff. Memorizing.
And I hope that everyone learned something. I hope you all enjoyed it. And thank you so much for tuning in. And thank you, Dr. Wood. And thank you, Dr. Starling. We really appreciate it. And hopefully everyone learned something, gave some new perspectives and things to think about going forward. And enjoy the rest of your summer. Stay healthy and enjoy your practice time. And good luck with everything.